Good morning, colleagues of NAMMCO. My name is Manuel Barange. I'm the Director of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division at the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I will be talking to you today on aquatic foods, and for that I will share my screen. And while I do so, please accept my apologies for not being able to be with you today and having to record this video instead. I trust you can see my screen. The presentation that I've prepared is entitled Realizing the Full Potential of Aquatic Foods. Now, when we talk about aquatic foods in FAO, we mean fish, molluscs, crustaceans, invertebrates of all types, and even algae and seaweeds that we use for human consumption. It is a very diverse source of food. We have almost 3,000 species that we capture in global fisheries and more than 650 that we culture. This diversity is part of its success and also part of its adaptability to future changes in the world. And the reason why aquatic foods have been increasingly in the spotlight is because of this figure, which shows that the number of undernourished in the world has been growing over the last few years, and particularly over the last 2 years as a result of the COVID pandemic, to the point that they have, the last 2 years have obliterated the successes in fighting hunger that we achieved in the early 2000s. Despite that, only about half of the countries that have a public health nutrition policy identifies aquatic foods as one of the objectives of nutrition of the country, and this needs to change. And one of the reasons why, or some of the reasons why aquatic foods have been increasingly in the spotlight can be shown in this figure. First, aquatic foods have a very high conversion ratio compared to land-based animals, and also have a low greenhouse gas emissions compared to land-based animals. Furthermore, when we look at the nutritional component, and this is a figure that comes from a paper that we published in Nature last year, and that was included in this report on the UN nutrition, when compared to land-based animals, in this case, mussels and sardines versus chicken and beef, the nutritional component of aquatic foods is much higher, much more diverse, and therefore has better outcomes. So what is the current status of aquatic food production? Well, this figure comes from the FAO SOFIA report, a report that I don't think that it needs any introduction to you all, a report that comes out every 2 years, summarizing the status of the sector. And in 2020, which is the year that the last SOFIA report reported on, we had a global record in aquatic food production, or rather in fisheries and aquaculture production, of 214 million tons, of which 178 million tons were from aquatic animals and 36 million from algae, which, as you know, the majority of which is not used for human consumption. Now, this production can be also broken down into 90 million tons of capture fisheries, which means a decline of about 2% from the previous year, and 86 million tons of aquaculture, which is an increase of almost 3% from the previous year. Both these percentage changes have suffered from COVID, both in capture fisheries in terms of the decline, and in the case of aquaculture, because the growth has not been as significant as in previous years. Now, SOFIA report also projects production for the rest of the decade, and this is what the figure shows in the SOFIA report, that by 2030 we expect a 14% growth from currently in aquatic animal production. Unfortunately, this is not enough, and you'll see why it's not enough if we look at what this turns to in terms of per capita consumption of aquatic products. We see that globally, the consumption will grow from 20.2 kilograms in 2020 to 21.4 kilograms, so an improvement in nutritional outcomes at global level. But in Africa, for example, we expect a decline to 9.8 kilograms per person per year. This is a continent that already consumes half of the global average. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it will drop even more to 8.4 kilograms per person per year. This is problematic if we are to fight hunger. And this is why aquatic foods need to step up and be counted. And for that reason, we first need to understand that it's a sector that has gone through enormous transformations already in the last few decades. This can be summarized in this figure. While the total capture fisheries have been practically stable since the 1990s, aquaculture has been growing very dramatically, particularly inland aquaculture. And that already tells us that any growth in the sector is likely to come from aquaculture rather than marine fisheries, or inland fisheries for that matter. Second important transformation to highlight is that the production that is used for human consumption has been growing over time. So you can see in this table the opposite figure, the proportion that is not used for human consumption, that was up to 30% in the 1970s, and now it's less than 12%. So we're making better use of aquatic animal production already. Now, how do we step up using these trends already as a guideline? Well, in FAO, we have a new strategy for this that we call Blue Transformation. Blue Transformation strategy tries to harness the possibility of tomorrow by making sure that we expand and improve our production in the sector for better outcomes. And Blue Transformation has 3 quantifiable objectives. The first one is this: sustainable aquaculture intensification and expansion satisfies the global demand for aquatic foods and distributed benefits equitably. We are hoping to achieve a 30 to 40% growth in global aquaculture by the end of this decade. This is a challenging target, but aquaculture has been growing faster than ever projected in the last few decades. So we think that if we continue that growth, we will be able to achieve this sort of production. The second objective of Blue Transformation is to ensure the effective management of all fisheries, 100% of fisheries being under management, so that they can deliver healthy stocks and secures equitable livelihoods. The objective or the outcome of this is to restore all fish stocks to the levels that are capable of producing MSY, maximum sustainable yield. Why we put so much emphasis into management, perhaps the following slide will explain it better. This slide, what it shows is one of the iconic figures of the Sophia report, which is the global trend in the state of marine fish stocks. And what it shows is that in the last assessment, 64.6% of fish stocks are sustainable. And that means that just over 35% are not. And this percentage indicates a deterioration of 1.2% from the previous assessment of Sophia. However, this calculation is done with all stocks being equal, so it's by number, regardless of the volume of production. If we weight by the volume of production, we also say that 82.5% of all landings of marine fisheries by volume come from sustainable stocks. And this has been an improvement of almost 4% from the previous Sophia report. If you combine these two figures together, what they tell us is that first, that the most valuable and larger stocks are better managed than the smaller, less valuable stocks, and perhaps that is to be expected. And second, that when we implement management measures, those tend to be successful. And that's why this objective of Blue Transformation is so much focused on having 100% of marine and inland stocks under effective management. The third objective of Blue Transformation is to make sure that we upgrade value chains to ensure the social, economic, and environmental viability of aquatic food systems. The outcomes of this objective are more varied. We want to reduce loss and waste by about 50% by the end of the decade. We want to make sure that we reduce the barriers to trade, that we add value to the products, that we raise awareness in consumers to value better what aquatic foods have to offer. And in that way, then improve the outcomes overall and the food security and nutrition security of planet. Now, blue transformation is not just a vision based on words and targets. Those can be quantified, and we have done so. We have done scenario analysis of different levels of achievement of this transformation that we call for, which can be summarized in this figure. We think that if blue transformation is implemented properly, we may get to over 25 kilograms per person per year as a consumption rate by the middle of the century. And this will be a significant increase and a significant contribution to ending hunger and malnutrition. However, this is not a given. Failure to transform can actually result in a decrease in per capita consumption to about 18.5 kilograms. And that will put an enormous pressure on land-based ecosystems. So this is where we are. This is the scenario. This is what we face. And we think that this blue transformation can make a big difference. And I hope that you will all understand this. And as we approach, or as we are in the decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals, that we work all together to make sure that we end hunger and malnutrition using aquatic foods in the most efficient and effective manner. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll thank you all very much for your attention, and I wish you well in your meeting this week.